dressed like a bat. You're out of your mind, Bruce Wayne.
Doesn't mean I'm wrong.
These videos are not for children. If you're a children, then piss off.
Hey there, it's me, your least favorite YouTuber, the Infuso. And this one might be a little challenging. I have spoke about every other major actor to ever play this part, except one. That's not coincidental either. I guess I really have a hard time articulating how I feel about Ben Affleck's time as the Dark Knight. In a lot of ways, he deserves to be complimented, and in other ways, he should probably be condemned. This is simultaneously one of the best, but also maybe one of the worst versions of the Caped Crusader. If you were clicking on this video hoping to see a brutal burial or just pure praise of this Batman, well then you're out of luck. Because this is me offering Ben all his well-earned roses. But those roses come with a couple of well-deserved thorns. I have a lot of issues with the Batman from the DCEU. But Ben Affleck is exactly none of those problems. He's a terrific actor with a resume that really speaks for itself. He's accomplished in his field, a veteran of his craft, not unlike the man he'd be tasked with playing. I completely understand how someone could look at Ben Affleck and go, oh yeah, that's Batman. Aesthetically speaking, I think Ben is the most comic book accurate Batman. Saying he looks the part is probably a bit of an understatement. More than any other actor to ever put on the cape and cowl, Ben Affleck just looks like Batman. And not just Batman, but Bruce Wayne. The man looks like he just stepped out of Batman the Animated Series. I mean, look at this. Compare and contrast. Where is the contrast? From the suits he wears to the way that he parts his hair, just everything. Every minute detail that went into this character's look and wardrobe is pure perfection. I wasn't crazy about the smaller ears and the bigger bat symbol, but it grew on me pretty quickly. And in time, I've come to really enjoy this Batman design. It's a Batman-accurate attire, with the added benefit of also being functional defensive armor. Not only does he look instantly identifiable in costume, but he also looks completely distinct from any other Batman who came before him. You would be forgiven for confusing Clooney, Kilmer, Keaton, and maybe even Bale at first sight. But Ben Affleck's Batman is unmistakable. He stands apart from the rest. It's uniquely its own while still being a valid variant of the world's greatest detective. Not crazy about the goggles though. I could do without those. I do not like them on his face. Just feels a little too Watchmen for me. You know what I'm saying? If this was a beauty contest and I was judging solely based on who looked the most like the character, then Ben Affleck wins each and every time, without question. Unfortunately though, it seems like this is this Batman's greatest strength. His very legitimate looking appearance. Now that's not to say that this is a bad performance put in by Good Will Hunting. There's actually a whole lot to appreciate, and even love, about this portrayal of Bruce Wayne. This Bruce's playboy persona has pretty much been perfected. As Bruce, his ego's unmatched, yet it's never over the top. He's not looking to be the obnoxious center of attention, but when engaged with, he is every bit as vain as you'd expect him to be. Smug isn't a personality trait for him, it's a personality. Drunkenly wooing women at public events. I think the subtle but decidedly dickish way that he acts as Gotham's favorite orphan makes this performance much more believable. He's very nonchalant in his narcissism. It's kinda sad that this half of the character gets very little screen time when all is said and done. But nonetheless, it's certainly time well spent. This Bruce Wayne certainly knows how to make an impression, and he does so while putting in the most minimal effort. In his private life, Bruce looks mentally exhausted and emotionally drained. You can see the years of untreated piling trauma and decades of stress of the hero job taking their effect. He's unhinged and clearly mentally unwell. This is a man who has seen a war as a self-appointed soldier. He has experienced pain most couldn't even fathom, and it's definitely taken a toll. We see a man who had sworn to protect humanity slowly begin to lose his. It's a true tragedy. A man who stands for and embodies hope at his core is becoming hopeless, which I think is very symbolic of this Batman's plight. He's a man who is stuck working toward an ultimately unattainable goal. He hasn't lost sight of the mission, but perhaps he's beginning to lose sight of the cause. This is a Bruce who's hell-bent on hurting as opposed to being dead set on healing. A mentally broken down, beaten up Bruce falling short of the mark, succumbing to his own inner demons. It's not a full-on turn to the dark side, Batman still works in the name of justice. It's just, now he's willing to do some pretty unjust things in that name. While Ben Affleck's Batman seems to be losing his humanity, he hasn't lost his compassion. He does all he does for the right reasons. It's just sometimes he's willing to do the wrong things for those right reasons. He jumps the gun, he makes mistakes, he begins regarding any and all powerful strangers as imminent threats. His mentality feels much more in line with the philosophies of Lex Luthor rather than Bruce Wayne. Hashtag not my billionaire. When we're first introduced to the character, he's weathered some terrible tragedies. They've affected him not only as Batman, but as a man. He's become alienated to the world around him and is now acting out in ways that alienate it from him. This Batman excels at creating fear in the hearts of those he comes across, but he neglects the fact that his reputation has extended beyond just the criminal underworld. Gotham has felt the force that is Batman, and it's caused even the innocent to feel a little unsure and uneasy about his presence. The GCPD, who have been known to protect him, are still skittish in his company. There are those on the force that are the first to point fingers at him whenever a crime is committed. Because Batman exclusively rules through scare tactics, that fear is extended past his intended targets. I won't lie and tell you that that's not part of the Batman character. Fear is definitely a big part of the Batman mythos. Fear is typically a part of the Batman character. It's just usually not the only part of the Batman character. Yet despite his barbaric actions and vicious nature toward those that oppose him, these movies make it explicitly clear that even in Bruce Wayne's darkest hour, his ultimate objective is always to save at any cost. True, that notion misguided him and allowed him to treat every potential threat as an absolute certainty that needed to be handled immediately, but he did these bad things with good intentions. He's not immune to screwing up, because ultimately Batman, he's just a guy. He is every bit as flawed as any other man who's come before him. The mask of Bruce Wayne slips even in his day-to-day life when havoc and tragedy rears its ugly head. He doesn't prioritize the persona when real-life people are in danger. In times of crisis, Bruce falls out of character and immediately resumes hero work, even if there is an audience there to witness it. His transition in and out of the two roles he's playing are completely seamless, but the separation is evident. Whether he has his mask on or his mask off, you always know which side of the character is speaking. On the subject of Bruce's deep cynicism, a lot of what makes this Batman work is pulled from Frank Miller's Batman comics. I wouldn't call this a direct adaptation of that Batman, because there are some differences, but it is without question very heavily inspired by that Batman, though he does change his ways and develop over time. It's only through the friendships formed throughout this line of films that Bruce grows as a character. On one hand, I always appreciate character growth and development. I like that these movies show us the impact that others have on him. But on the other hand, some of these lessons learned both seem off pace-wise, and also feel like they should have been past problem solved. Bruce is a little late in the game to completely reinvent his legacy. I think a Batman who develops compassion in the later stages of his crime-fighting career is a Batman who fought the good fight for years without just cause, more focused on hurting the bad instead of helping the good. And I get it, Batman's very strong and Batman throws a lot of punches, but he does a lot more than that. This is one of my all-time favorite depictions of the Bruce and Alfred dynamic. Alfred seems like a supportive, albeit somewhat disappointed father to Bruce. I wouldn't say their relationship is hostile, but there's definitely some tension in the ranks at first. Alfred loves Bruce, but fears what he's becoming. Bruce's methods have changed over time, becoming more and more extreme, using cruel methods on those he encounters, crossing lines in the name of the greater good. It's clear that this Alfred doesn't approve of Bruce's latest actions, thinking that he's taking his objective a step or two too far. Alfred is a constant source of guidance for this Bruce, even if he doesn't always listen to him. He spends all his screen time desperately trying to reason with Bruce and make him reflect on what he's done and what he's become. But for the most part, his worries fall on deaf bad ears. Alfred never comes across as confrontational to Bruce, but he's also not afraid of getting confrontational when necessary. It feels like a parent who's slowly learning that they don't have the control over their child that they once had. Bruce is going to do whatever he thinks is best, and all Alfred can do at the end of the day is offer his own 2 cents. In a lot of ways, this Alfred feels like Bruce's Jiminy Cricket. He's there to provide the light of clarity when Bruce is consumed by his own darkness, to motivate him to make better decisions and not act out of impulse. Or at the very least, try to ground him and bring him back to reality. Make sure that he's scheduling a social life in between rooftop visits. Without Alfred, this Batman would probably be completely soured on society. Many other relationships in this Batman's life also add to his development, though unfortunately there are a few major missing dynamics along the way. These movies don't offer up any sidekicks. Any Batman-Robin relationship is past tense, as Robin himself is very past tense. And this Batman shares all of 2 scenes with the Joker, and while one of them is at least somewhat memorable, neither are anything of consequence. Their relationship is never really explained, elaborated on, or shown. It's just kinda lightly suggested, and it feels like there's absolutely nothing of substance between the two. I don't really think I need to tell you why I think that's a mistake. And while I do think that J. Jonah Jameson was an inspired choice for Commissioner Jim Gordon, neither cut of Justice League gives this relationship a whole lot of room to blossom or really even breathe. A history between the two is evident, and the scenes that they share together are enjoyable. It's just crazy for me to think that there's only 2 scenes of these two interacting in all of the DC cinematic universe. That just doesn't really seem right. I think this relationship could have been really good, but there's not nearly enough of it for me to even confidently say that. I wish we got more time with both of these characters. And more importantly, I wish both of these characters got more time together. Regardless of these very notable and noticeable absences, they're made up for by the connections that this Batman actually does make. As I've said before, I believe this Batman is bettered by the company that he keeps. Bruce goes from broody loner to social butterfly in record time. At first almost exclusively working alone, to suddenly leading an army of Avengers. Though legally distinct, we do not call them that. When Batman is finally put in a leader role, it almost feels like it's begrudgingly. He and Diana are constantly trying to motivate each other to lead the team. And maybe this was the movie trying to show that the two have an equal power dynamic, and Diana is every bit the leader that Bruce is. And that's fine. That's not the worst depiction of the team and its leadership that I've ever seen. That's no problems here. But I do think in execution, it can sometimes come across like Bruce and Diana just trying to pass the buck. This feels like something that neither of them want to do, and they're just constantly trying to convince the other to be the one to step up and do it. I understand what they were trying to do. I just think that ultimately it makes the idea of a Justice League feels somewhat undesirable. Nobody wants to go out of their way to lead it. Outside of the lapse in leadership and logic, the two continually butt heads, but it never feels like it comes from a place of malice. Their constant clashes come across as the two challenging each other's viewpoints, fighting to make the other one stronger in every sense of the word. They feel like they're in constant intellectual combat, but it's very sportsmanlike competition. Their differences inform each other, and they make adjustments to their techniques and technology. And their conflicting perceptions help them see outside their own viewpoint. They form a very symbiotic relationship, as they better each other as crime fighters, and maybe even to some degree, as people. I buy into this relationship, and their flirtations have always felt very legitimate. I really like their dynamic, and I think a lot of the original Justice League's strongest scenes involve these two interacting. Even in the Snyder Cut, I would say they have some of the most informative and interesting scenes. Though their relationship is depicted as being romantic, it's never overly affectionate or expressively lovey-dovey, which is unique to this specific pairing, as this Wonder Woman has been much more openly and intimately involved in her previous relationship with Steve Trevor. I think this speaks to the uniqueness of this relationship and how it differs from what came before. It's nice to see somebody not have the same relationship on repeat, but recast their significant other. Nonetheless, I feel like this dynamic assists both characters. Equally impressive is his relationship with Clark. I think a lot of what I said about the Wonder Woman and Batman ship in these movies can also be applied to the Batman-Superman feud turned friendship. I don't want to go into too much detail here about this dynamic, only for the fact that I've previously covered it on my Henry Cavill's Superman video, so if you're ever interested in seeing my thoughts on that, feel free to check that video out. But what I will say is that while I'm not a fan of the circumstances surrounding this alliance, when it's finally formed, it's done justice. No pun intended. They work toward the same goal, but they have different means of doing so. They operate completely differently, They're night and day, but they're both a part of the same sky. We get the best performances out of both these actors when they share the screen, and these two characters get the best out of each other whenever they share the battlefield. Batman aids the rest of the team as a devoted and tireless leader, offering up tactical advice and support where and when he can. I can't sit here and act like his back and forth banter with characters like Aquaman or Cyborg are particularly memorable, or even fully established. I feel like we got the start of those stories, but they really haven't moved past the blueprint. And I also can't say that I'm incredibly fond of Bruce's relationship with Barry in these movies. There's a very cynical part of me that sees them as a cheap attempt at replicating Tony Stark and Peter's dynamic from the MCU. I'm not saying my beliefs are entirely founded, I could be off, but legitimately, that's all it ever struck me as. I don't hate Ezra Miller as the Flash, and I do enjoy Ben Affleck's efforts as Batman. But these two, together, they just never did it for me. Bruce sort of takes on a mentor role with Barry due to his immaturity and inexperience, and, well, that's understandable. But these movies don't really allow for a whole lot of breathing room considering these events are transpiring in the midst of a world-ending crisis. There's a lot to love about this Batman. As I've stated, they've borrowed from a very valid original source. In a lot of ways, this is one of the most comic book accurate Batman ever put to screen. I mean, the guy literally comes right out and says,
I'll have a contingency plan for that.
I have a contingency.
oh yeah, that's Batman. However, in some of the most important and integral ways, this is the least comic book accurate Batman ever put to screen. While there are many great qualities to this performance and this presentation of Gotham's Protector, mistakes were definitely made. There are several fundamental differences between this Batman of the big screen and the Batman from comic book panels. For starters, this Batman seems a little bit less secretive about his secret identity. He openly talks to Alfred over the suit's built-in intercom, and he refers to him by his first name. Why would you do that? I mean, you go out of your way to use a voice modulator so you can disguise your voice, but you're acknowledging and communicating publicly with those closest to you in your personal life. I don't know. It seems like you're going the extra route in some areas, but you're not even preparing yourself in others. I understand you gotta communicate with the guy, but code names are a thing in this universe too, pal. Look at little not Jimmy Olsen, who is not Talon. You use a stage name, a fake name. You just don't start talking to your butler when you got the mask on. I mean, really, how many Alfreds could there be in Gotham City? This Batman also trusts just about everyone with knowing his deepest, darkest secret. Superman and Wonder Woman kind of already know just because. Cyborg can essentially see all, so he figures it out. I'm not going to hold him to that. But Bruce clues Barry and Arthur in on his true self before they've ever even agreed to join the team. Now, let's compare that to the Justice League cartoon series, where Batman finally reveals his identity to the whole team, after years and years and years of them working together, and only doing so in a dire time when a disguise was needed. That just doesn't seem like a smart move. It's a very uncalculated step from one of the most intellectually sound strategists out there. He also clearly chooses the wrong people with this information, because Arthur Curry loudly acknowledges Bruce's nighttime alter ego in the company of strangers. We're not talking about a calculated risk, we're talking about a completely unnecessary liability. Somewhat in that same vein, I also feel like we see Batman without his mask a little too often for my liking. And I don't mean as Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne himself is a mask. I mean as Batman. There's just a few too many shots of Batman walking around with a cape but no cowl. That just feels like a very un-Batman thing to do, to me. There have also been some people who complain that this Batman sounds like he came out of a Marvel movie with all the quips and one-liners he has. A lot of people will point to the character's serious demeanor and stoic nature and say, Batman doesn't have a sense of humor. He wouldn't be cracking jokes. But that's just not entirely true. Batman's actually quite sarcastic. It's just that his zingers are very dry and very subtle. This man's hitting the punchlines, but he's not sticking around to hear the applause. And he doesn't really make jokes unless he's specifically set up to make one. I grew up with lines like this.
At this point, he probably is.
So I find lines like this...
What are your superpowers again? I'm rich.
to still be very much in tune with the Bruce Wayne that I know. However, I will also readily admit that Joss Whedon's take on the character was not my favorite. That Batman can come across as, well, a little bit goofy, to be honest. The guy's just chuckling his way through this Frankenstein movie with a performance that feels about as uneven tonally as the movie itself. But most importantly, where these movies get it wrong, and look, if you're tired of hearing me say it, then know that I'm tired of hearing me say it, but Batman doesn't kill. Now, you can make an argument that other on-screen Batmen have killed. As a matter of fact, it's something I've mentioned in a couple of my other videos. But that's still something I take issue with each and every time I see it. But I think in these movies, it's especially off-putting. Previous Batman films were made during times of uncertainty with how much mythos was safe to pull from. You know, it was very experimental with how much you should just make up. The general public didn't even really know Batman on the intimate level that they do today. So there was a lot more leeway back in 1989. No one was going to shout out at you, hey, that's not my Batman, because, you know, they didn't really have a lot to go by. Their Batman did this. Today, it's widely known about Batman's no-kill policy. As a matter of fact, it's one of the most integral parts of this character's morality. Batman isn't going to kill you. He's just going to hurt you real bad. Even worse than just openly killing people with no hesitation, he uses a gun several times, which just looks and feels completely wrong. And for me, it breaks the character more than anything else. I shouldn't have to go on record and explain that Bruce Wayne would not use the same weapon that took the lives of his parents. It's really, really off-putting. Batman should not be holding a gun. It feels morally wrong. Those two things shouldn't be put together. And they shouldn't be put together as much as they are. It's honestly a little crazy. I shouldn't really have to go out of my way to say that Batman wouldn't use the weapon that took the lives of his parents. He's very anti-gun for that reason. But then again, I also shouldn't say that Batman wouldn't assault a parent in front of their child in an alley for that same very obvious reason. But yeah, that's something he does in this universe. He beats the holy hell out of Deadshot and arrests him in the presence of his daughter. I'd like to think that Batman would not want to scar a child and see something horrific happen to their parents in an alleyway. There were a lot of atrocious decisions made with the development of this character. They had the character say things I don't think he'd ever say, do things he would never do, and on occasion his actions have been the antithesis of everything that Batman stands for. These movies don't do right by Batman, but Ben Affleck did. The problem with this Batman was never the actor, it has always been the material. Ben Affleck was an inspired choice, I think he rose to the occasion, and I think he elevated the material that he had to work with. A lesser actor, this probably would have been worse with. But a lot of the time, I find myself trying to look past all of these negatives that the movie has to offer me, to appreciate the positive performance that Ben is giving. Like I said at the beginning, I have a lot of problems with this particular Batman. Once again, Ben Affleck is none of those problems. What's sad about this interpretation of The Dark Knight for me, though, is that Ben Affleck could have been, and quite frankly should have been, the greatest Batman put to screen. His credentials are unlimited. As I've stated before, there was a lot of potential and promise with putting him in the cowl. Unfortunately, what weighs down this incredible performance is the sometimes atrocious depiction of the character that these movies offer up. Ben Affleck definitely deserves to have his work acknowledged. I think undoubtedly in the big conversation of Best Batman, his name will inevitably be brought up. And as far as I'm concerned, Ben Affleck was great for Batman. But these movies weren't always great for Batman. There was definitely a roof that was put over it, and Ben Affleck's acting grappling hook can only get so far. He was as great as he was allowed to be. With all that being said, if you like this video and want to see an actor/character analysis on Ezra Miller's time as the Flash, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying,
Flash rain, flash winds, flash lightning.
I was your least favorite YouTuber, Infuso, and I thank you for watching. Hope to see you in the next one.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.